On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. This is episode 71, created on January 23rd, 2024. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil out on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Hello, gentlemen. Tonight, in celebration of, sadly, the end of the season, but ending on a very high note, I'm going with a 2023 Surly Barrel-Aged Darkness.
The Maine Beer Company is one of my favorite breweries, and they had one that was named appropriately for the results of us playing San Francisco in the playoffs again, another one.
All right, and a repeat beverage for me, a Hendrick's Gin Martini. How dry is it? I didn't even look at the bottle of vermouth. That's how dry it is. All right, you can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. And just the audio is now available on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Going to keep it pretty narrow this week. It is the divisional round review of a game in San Francisco, and then we'll start making some predictions for the championship games coming up. With that said, we always talk about there's really only one statistic that matters, and this weekend it was 24-21. San Francisco 49ers take a victory away from the Green Bay Packers. Packers season effectively ends after game 19, 9-8 on the season, 1-1 on the postseason. Big picture, how was this game? How was this season?
I want to go to what I was thinking pregame. And what I noticed is that I had a higher level of nerves, a higher level of excitement than I've had for a playoff game in years. Last week, it set expectations. It had set hope, and hope in a way that was very different. This was a new team. It was a team that had entirely different possibilities than any team we've had, basically going back until 2010. And I really was feeling the nerves pregame. And at a core level, it was that disappointment in how it ended after all of that excitement. And yes, San Francisco did a lot of great things. San Francisco is clearly a great team, but we had a lead. We had done a lot of things really well in that game. And in the end, we didn't finish it off. And this game has been pretty crushing to me in a way that I didn't expect if you'd asked me even a week ago.
Well, I'm bummed because my pick wasn't right, for starters. No, seriously, it was very disappointing afterwards when we had our Zoom call, which I think was very cathartic. There were kind of two schools of thought. The first one is we got further than anybody expected, and this was a great team, great season. They learned a lot. Okay, fine. The other thought, though, is that it's unfortunate that there's a possibility, albeit with a young team and everything else, that it's an opportunity wasted. Now, my hope is that we'll be sitting here next year at this time, going into the division championship game, and Green Bay is the number one seed, or will be playing in said game. And so that makes this loss and this kind of cumulative season important, but not as crushing. Versus if next year at this time we're sitting here and Green Bay is not also in the division championship, it's going to be really opportunity wasted. Now, that's a really high expectation. I think based on some offseason moves, I mean, there's a lot to go yet, but man, the future certainly does look bright.
It does. You know, we look at how we started this season, and between the three of us, we made predictions of 9-8, 10-7 records. We had very high hopes of this team making the playoffs, partly because we really saw an easy schedule on the calendar. And the funny thing about that is the games that we thought would be easy, they really
weren't.
kind of stood the pooch on, right? I mean, you look at, for in particular, the Raiders game, the Broncos game, the Giants game, even the Steelers game, because the Steelers weren't as good as we expected them to be. But this is a team that started off 2-5. At the point where it's 2-5, we're thinking, okay, maybe we'll get 6 wins out of this season. Jordan Love in his first year as a starter. We'll compare it to Aaron Rodgers' first year as a starter. That team in 08 was 6-10. Can this team be 6-11, maybe 7-10? And that's what we were looking at after the 7th game, 2-5, and really just hoping to salvage something to make it look like we weren't horrible. And then this team from there goes on a 7-3 run to finish the season 9-8, and with big wins in Detroit, at home against Kansas City, taking care of the Rams and the Chargers. These are all games that you start ticking off and you're like, holy cow, they're doing something. And the way the season ended, we knew it would be a growing pain season. And I thought it would be kind of growing pains as a whole. But this team grew and developed and it peaked at the right time. And peaking late in the season, now, like you said, Neil, those hopes coming into play, now it's like, oh my gosh, we're peaking and we're relatively healthy. That's one of the things about the postseason we haven't really talked about is the teams that are the healthiest tend to do best. Then going into the San Francisco game, and they're riddled with injuries in some key positions. So at one point, this team is up 21-14 in this game. And yeah, it's crushing. But then you look at it from the beginning, like, well, wait, we did so much better than expected. There is nothing to be sad about on this season. You can, okay, I'm bummed out. Hey, they're going to play more games and we'll be back next year and we'll do it all again.
But I want to go back to what Jeff was talking about in that there are windows, and it seems in the modern NFL, those windows can open and shut very, very quickly. And there's not a single team that's remaining in this playoffs that we can't beat. Heck, we've beaten two of them. We're ahead of one of them by a touchdown in the fourth quarter. It was an opportunity, and the fact that we were ahead really hurts. And one of the things that I was thinking about, and I'm not comparing Jordan Love to Dan Marino, but the fact that Dan Marino went to the Super Bowl in his second year and never made it back. And you just never know. And you look at, for example, the situation within our division. How good are the Lions going to be for how long? The Bears are getting better. You've got other teams that are good teams. Arguably, you really want to win your division. Well, our division may be tough to win for a number of years into the future, and we're going to have a tougher schedule next year. We, of course, are thinking that, well, maybe this team is like the 94 Packers, or even better, it's like the 95 Packers. But that assumes a lot of other things as far as other teams, and it assumes that the tougher schedule is something that we're going to handle well. And I am hopeful of that, but you just never know. And what I do know is we had 7 points with 15 minutes to go for a ticket to the NFC Championship game against what turned out to be a team that we had already beaten, the Detroit Lions. And it's that closeness that in the modern NFL, you don't have that many opportunities. And when you miss those opportunities, it hurts more.
And it's not just that, Neil, it's even a little bit closer. There's 9.5 minutes in the game when Aaron Jones breaks off this 53-yard run, right? And the Packers are up 21-17, and you're feeling like they can get in the end zone again, which really would put a big lead, would put a 10, possibly 11-point lead on the game. And then it just kind of falls apart. And that, I think, is where the whole momentum started to change. I don't know if you guys felt it, but that's about where I started to feel it as well. And it's one of those things where when you feel that momentum slipping away, you're just like, wait, no, I know, come back. And you cannot bring it back no matter what you do.
No, and unfortunately during the prior game, even though we were up, 4 touchdowns in Dallas, I sort of had that feeling. And so it was sort of deja vu all over again, right? Can we hold this lead? Can we sort of put it away, keep our foot on the gas, whatever, be consistent and put this game away? And the answer was, unfortunately, no.
But in the end, a big reason why we didn't have the opportunity to put the game away as we did against Dallas is because we had opportunities in the first half, just as we did against Dallas. And the difference was, instead of being ahead 27-0, which was in play if all of those opportunities came through, we weren't, right? We never had a lead more than 3-0 in the first half, despite the fact that we got down into the red zone 3 times on our first 3 drives. We dropped a near certain pick 6. It's those opportunities. It's 6 points out of 3 trips to the red zone. It's dropping a pick 6. That's the difference in the end as to why we couldn't hold on in the second half.
I mean, honest to God, this could have been like 27-0 again. I mean, that is not outside of the realm of possibility here. And that's when, when these things started to happen, that's when I started to, like, okay, are we going to be able to overcome these, as a young team or inexperience or whatever you want, or just sort of the way this year's gone anyway? Were the Packers going to be able to overcome all of these missed opportunities is probably the best way to say it. And that's when I started to get sort of the sinking, like, oh God. But they certainly kept it in play and didn't give up. I mean, certainly not, obviously. I mean, this was not a blowout. They played obviously better than the odds makers thought, because they covered the spread for starters. And I think they really put a scare into San Francisco as the number one seed. This is the 7 seed coming in. It was kind of that little, just so close, right?
You talk about momentum, but we had 1:07 left with all 3 timeouts before our final drive, and we only needed 3 points to tie the game, 7 points to win the game. We had the opportunity all the way through our final drive, and it's that is that, if there were a point, like you take some of the games we played against Dallas in the 90s where we played competitively for a while, and then they just sort of, Emmett Smith and
Kicked
Troy
our
Aikman
ass.
and Michael Irvin just sort of, they overwhelmed us. And there was never a case where San Francisco overwhelmed us. We were always in a position where we could still win the game. There was hope on that last drive. That hope continued throughout the entire game. And it's the fact that there was never a situation we were out of the game, and there was always a chance to win it, that made it the most painful.
So to kind of go with that thought, Neil, how many times did the Packers in 2023 face this similar situation? There were a lot of games that came down to really the kind of the final last possession or two. And their success rate was not great based on the asshats, based on, final drives, interceptions, drop balls, whatever. So maybe, just maybe, that all of the bad things or potential learning experience from this is that you'd almost have to go back, kind of like regress back to the mean. In this case, it would be better. There's going to be 2024 that Jordan Love will be able to put together a couple game-winning drives, that we will hit the field goal at the end of the game to tie or win. Scenarios like that, the future is bright. And it'll be interesting to see if that learning process of winning and not losing continues forward.
We even mentioned that back in week 3, Jeff. Week 3 was the New Orleans Saints game where this team did come in. They won on a field goal at the end of the game. And it's one of those things where we said, can this team hold on to this? Did they use that win to say, we know how to win a game? We know how to stay in a game.
Yes.
And at first, maybe they didn't, because we faltered a little bit after that. Like I said, we went from 2-1 there to 2-5 after that. But I still feel in the season as a whole, that win, along with a few other ways that they played some games this year, that, yeah, they knew that they could stay in the game.
If you just listen to the interviews with Jordan Love after the game, it's clear that Jordan Love is going to use this as a springboard to make himself better. He's got that element of character. He clearly wants to be a great quarterback. He realizes it was not a perfect ending for him. It is clear that for Jordan Love, it's going to be a springboard, and I'm hoping that that is going to be true for a lot of the players on this team, that the youth is going to be able to take advantage of this in future years. And whether that happens or not, obviously a devastating loss can go 2 different ways the following year. I think it's more likely it's going to go in the positive direction. This is going to get them more focused in the offseason. It's going to realize that, oh, we're not just going to run over teams just because we're the team of destiny. It's that, oh, no, there's a different level between getting a winning record, making the playoffs, and winning multiple games in the playoffs. You want to win those multiple games to get to a championship, to get to a Super Bowl. And I think they've got that taste of, we were so close to going to that NFC championship. We want to do what is necessary to make it to that next level. And it's going to be that focus that is going to be a determining factor in what happens next year.
Well, and I think next year, then, this team is going to be an offensive juggernaut. They played through it. I mean, not in spite of whatever the defense is going to do, but you've got mostly first and second year players, other than Aaron Jones and the running backs. So they sort of tasted this. They're so young. So you figure that, okay, once they figure out the routes, once they have more practices, I already read that the receivers want to work out with Jordan Love in California in the offseason. This is going to continue to build not only familiarity, but they seem to really enjoy each other's company. But I mean, you look at the 2 touchdowns in this game, Bo Melton and Tucker Kraft. This was not wide receiver 1 and tight end 1 scoring these touchdowns. So even though they were in the game, that's where it's going to be really interesting to see if they really take this and say, all right, just, F everybody else, we're just going to be one of the top ranked offenses in the league and give Matt LaFleur the keys to the kingdom, go for it. And they'll actually be able to not only execute the plays that are called, but also the off schedule ones as well. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, but they just at some point they'll need to backfill with the defense, but that's a whole other conversation, obviously.
Jeff, it sounds like a real easy decision to make. You're 23 years old, you're a professional athlete, just came off of a great season. Hey, do you want to spend 6 months hanging out in California with your buddies trying to get better at your craft? Gee, I don't know. I think that sounds like a great thing to do. Yeah, so if that develops camaraderie amongst that crew, great. I'm all for it. Neil, we even talk about camaraderie amongst the offensive linemen, and you know how important that is, that 5 guys can work together as a unit. And again, a young unit that even when they were interchanging those cogs in the machine, they still work together well. There's so much about this offense that is promising.
I'd like to move into some of the highlights of the game because there were a lot of things that we did well in this game, and let's focus on them. Let's just start out with our first drive. We had another really strong first drive on offense and on defense. And if you look at how we moved the ball, we were consistently getting third down conversions and getting those first downs. Overall, in the first quarter, the Packers had 7 first downs to only 1 for San Francisco. And it's mostly because we kept converting the ball. We were 3 of 4 on third down conversions in the first quarter. And oh, by the way, the NFL stats don't count defensive pass interference by penalty as a third down conversion. So 4 of our first 5 third downs were converted. So we started off well as far as our offense is concerned, and we continued that for most of the game. Obviously, there were a couple of bad plays later on. There was the critical question of the 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. But as Jordan Love has done for much of the second half of the season, converting on third downs has been a big part of our game. His ability to deliver in the clutch has been central, and he delivered in the clutch throughout most of that game.
Yeah, but the difference between the success we had in Dallas and the situation here was that, yeah, we were getting the defensive pass interference penalties, which was awesome, moving the ball down the field. But when we got into the red zone, that's when things changed.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed when we got, I mean, it wasn't just that we're in the red zone. We were inside the 15-yard line on those first 3 drives. It's not like we barely got there. If you look at our drives, our first 5 full drives went into the San Francisco red zone. To the San Francisco 11, field goal. To the San Francisco 14, downs. To the San Francisco 9 with the 1st and goal, field goal. 2 touchdowns to start the second half. 5 straight drives made it into the San Francisco red zone. And on the missed field goal, we also made it down into their red zone. We had 6 total drives that made it into the San Francisco 25-yard line. You have 6 drives inside their 25, you should end up with more than 21 points.
Agreed. And this wasn't a case where we were, getting behind the sticks, bad first down plays, things like that. We had 1 accepted penalty against us the entire game. It was on the 3rd drive for the ineligible man downfield. 5-yard penalty that we overcame. It wasn't sacks because, Jordan Love wasn't sacked in this entire game, right? This was not penalties. This was not sacks or really negative plays. I mean, there were running plays that were stopped for maybe a yard or 2 or maybe even a loss. But man, the way Aaron Jones was running, why not? I think it was worth sort of the gamble. But yeah, once we got into the red zone and got stalled, the team didn't really seem to bother them that much. I mean, they just kept plugging along, and they kept still having success by being able to move the ball.
And with all that, Jeff, we talk about in the red zone, scoring drives, things like that. The nice thing about that first quarter is Green Bay on the scoring side wins that quarter 3-0. And it is promising from that perspective that maybe we're struggling on offense, but lo and behold, we're actually doing something on defense to keep San Francisco from scoring as well. So we are up 3-0. Now, downside with that second quarter, we only pick up another 3 points. But the way that kind of second quarter went, there was a lot of sway or potential sway near the end of the first half to, I think, go into halftime trailing 7-6 was, all things considered, a small victory, but it was tough going through that second quarter, though, Neil.
Well, the second quarter started out with that 3rd and 1 in their red zone. And yeah, you look at what the Packers defense did against the Niners offense in the first quarter, and they only got 22 yards in that first quarter. And their only drive in the first quarter ended up with a 3rd and 6 in which we got our only sack of the game. The San Francisco offense picked up steam in that second quarter. And I said that the Packers had 7 first downs to 1 for San Francisco in the first quarter. In the second quarter, it was 3 first downs for Green Bay to 8 for San Francisco. So essentially even in first downs overall in the first half, but very different numbers in the first quarter versus the second quarter. And the yardage numbers matched that. The Packers only had 63 yards of offense in the second quarter to 131 yards of offense for San Francisco in that second quarter. And part of that is that the running game did well in the first quarter, but the running game stalled in both the second and the third quarters. Aaron Jones had only 4 rushes for 14 yards in that second quarter. And moving into the third quarter, he only had 5 rushes for 5 yards in the third quarter. So we had a really rough stretch in the middle of that game where our running game was really not moving. And you look at cases where we're not able to make a little bit of conversion, it's because, well, the running game was not quite up to the level of, for example, Aaron Jones on his 54-yard run in the fourth quarter. In fact, half of Aaron Jones' running yards were on that one run in the fourth quarter. The rest of the game, it was 54 yards. And yes, that's the nature of explosive backs, is that there is going to be a feast or famine element to it. But we suffered from a famine in our running game in the second and third quarters.
So Aaron Jones in the first drive had 26 yards. The other thing on the short yardage, just want to touch on that. The fact that sort of they were doing the love shove with a short yardage situation, to have Aaron Jones and Christian Watson pushing Jordan Love, maybe want to rethink that.
The problem is partly that they didn't try to think it. They tried to get the playoff as quickly as possible. And a 4th and 1 is not where you're trying to just get something through as quickly as possible. You need to have a play that is going to be a good play. And yes, having Jones and Watson pushing Love is not giving yourself the best possible opportunity.
Neil, I think what I saw on that, though, is the offense was trying to hurry up that play without substitutions. They were trying to catch San Francisco off guard there, to their credit, but I'm not a big fan of this play in general. It works for some teams. I just don't feel it works in Green Bay. I like Jordan Love. He's a tall, skinny kid. I have affinity for tall, skinny kids playing quarterback, I guess. But he's not going to push that driving leg power. And then, like you said, if they don't have the personnel on the field because they haven't made a substitution, you're not getting the push from behind that you need. I was really, really hoping they were going to fake it somehow on there, fake that dive and just bootleg and run the way the hell out on the outside. Something that has to be a play that you work something else off of, because I don't think Green Bay has the personnel to run that play consistently successfully.
Agreed. Or take a page from Josh Allen. Instead of running right through the line, get the ball and go 4 steps to your left or one way or the other, just to get sort of away from the pile. And if you can get around, and because I think Love is probably quick enough to be able to do that, just not what they did there.
The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. I am not generally a fan of fucking around and dilly-dallying behind the line when you've got a yard to go. Just smash it down their throats and get your damn yard. And the problem is when you've got the wrong personnel in, when you're pushing with players that are not huge players, you're not trying to smash it down their throats. Have a play that is really going to beat the other team.
That's what the offseason is for. Let's work on that play. We need a short yardage play that is going to work in Green Bay. Call it what you want.
Yep.
But we need something that's going to work on these short
Sorry,
yardage.
John, we don't need one short yardage play because we've had a lot of short yardage failures on the season. We need a whole suite of short yardage plays that are going to give us a lot of ways to get first downs when one should be getting first downs. Mathematically, if it's a 3rd and 1, you should be making a first down about 80 to 90% of the time. And I don't think that we're that close to that, at least in situations that matter.
Until they went for the 2-point conversion, and that was pretty sweet. That was a situation where I had a little consternation there, but man, that was a pretty sweet play. So maybe a little more of that.
I think that the 2-point conversion plays, because they're so different conceptually, they're going to be run differently than a 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 at the 40-yard line, because you have more field to work with. Obviously, on the backside, defenses are going to play it a little bit differently. It's not just, is it a short yardage where you need 1 or 2 yards, but it's short yardage where you are on the field as well. And you're right, Neil. Let's, like I said, I kind of saying, let's get one play that works, but you're right. You need a slew of plays, but get one that works and then build off of it and build off of that, so that when other teams get used to seeing you do this thing, now you fake doing that thing and you've got something else. It's the sleight of hand, the illusion, if you will, that comes from offenses. That's what makes an offense work, is you have plays that work off of other plays that keep building. And I do see them in this team. I would like to see more of it.
At any rate, it's halftime and we're only down by 1 point. The good news is that we forced a stop by San Francisco at the end of the second quarter. They had 2 long drives in that second quarter, but they had a field goal blocked, and that blocked field goal meant that we weren't in a situation of potentially going 2 scores down in the beginning of the second half with a quick drive. And being down only 1 point, San Francisco gets the ball, and our defense had their best drive of the entire game. They forced San Francisco to a 3-and-out in the first drive of the second half. Now the Packers get the ball back, and now we get to see about those halftime adjustments. We get to see, how is this offense going to take control of this game? Third quarter was really about the Packers offense taking control.
And we've seen this throughout the season. Where has Jordan Love played his best? In the third quarter.
You took the words right out of my mouth, John.
Okay.
I was going to say the same thing.
You can have them back. Go ahead and say the same thing.
No, so it's sort of business as usual in the third quarter for the offense. They get the ball and they go 75 yards down the field. Now, in this particular case, there was another defensive pass interference, and this one was really key on a 3rd and 15. But it was still the fact that the receivers in San Francisco had to grab on in order to defend. And so, again, kind of looking to the future, they're not just keying on Watson. They're not just keying on Reed. They're, whomever. That was good to see, especially in a game like this where typically a lot of penalties aren't called unless it's really obvious.
And these were pretty obvious.
Right. And because they were beat, the 3rd defensive pass interference of the game, and on a 3rd and 15 in this case, was huge, leading to the Packer touchdown and a go-ahead touchdown, which was business as usual in the third quarter.
Packers taking the lead, this certainly felt extremely exciting. And I do want to note the Packers did convert 2 3rd and 1s on that first offensive drive of the second half. Now, they only got 1 yard on each of those 2 times and needed to use a challenge for one of those, but nonetheless, they did convert 2 3rd and 1s. We're feeling good at this point, ahead 13-7. Unfortunately, San Francisco came back and in 4 plays went 75 yards down the field to retake the lead. The big thing that I thought, certainly, and I think many other people did, is that, okay, now we're getting into the game that we thought was going to happen. We're getting into the point where these offenses are going to start rolling. This is going to be a track meet.
And it was. There were 3 touchdowns in a row. San Francisco goes down somewhat almost effortlessly, shockingly, based on what had transpired earlier in the game. And so Green Bay gets the ball back. Now, the key here was a positive asshat play.
It was almost a negative asshats play.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times for the asshats. Yes. The fumble was great consternation at that point, but great hustle to get it recovered. But man, that could have been just brutal.
Yeah, San Francisco gets the ball back there at that point and drives down, and all of a sudden we're down 8 points. That would have been very, very different situation. But thankfully, Wilson was able to be in the right place in the right time. And a lot of fumble recovery is just pure luck. You can say, well, the person's aggressive, but in the end, it's about a 50-50 chance for any fumble recovery as far as which team is going to get it. It bounced the right way that Wilson was able to take care of it. And 4 plays later, 2-yard touchdown pass to Tucker Kraft. And we have a 21-14 lead with 5 minutes left in the third quarter.
Next drive, though, again, 3-and-out for San Francisco. Think of how our defense is looking in this second half. Another 3-and-out, but again, the big number. Green Bay wins the score in the third quarter, 15-7. We're up 21-14. Things seem to be moving along nicely, but San Francisco is pushing downfield near the end of that quarter.
Wow, the biggest problem is that our offense was starting to sputter, and specifically the first of the two Jordan Love interceptions was on that immediate next drive, and giving San Francisco the ball essentially at midfield was not an ideal situation. But despite that, San Francisco actually only made it 14 yards on their next drive. It was because they got the ball at midfield that they were in a position to, in the first play of the fourth quarter, kick a 52-yard field goal, which seemed unlikely after a miss earlier. But the defense still stepped up on that San Francisco drive that led to their field goal that made it 21-17.
7 plays, 14-yard drive. The defense stepping up. So thinking, okay, they held him, an unfortunate turnover. Let's hope that this turnover doesn't determine the outcome of the game. And I don't think it did. I mean, it certainly was unfortunate, but it didn't really turn the game. But again, like you said,
Jeff, it was a 3-point game and they scored 3 points on that turnover. So I don't know we can discount it that easily. But in the positive sense, the Packers were clearly the stronger team in that third quarter. We had 7 first downs to only 3 for San Francisco. Yardage-wise, San Francisco was a little bit better, but that does not include the 41-yard defensive pass interference to Melton, where Melton clearly had them beat. If you include the penalty yards, we had an advantage in yards. We obviously had the advantage in points. And after San Francisco kicks the field goal as the first play of the fourth quarter, the Packers got the ball back. We've got a lead. We've got the ball. It's the fourth quarter. It's go time.
Or not. A 3 and
right,
out.
it should be. And I think, right. I think we kind of already talked about this fourth quarter, right? That we are in the driver's seat in this game. And we have so many expectations that are changing just in this game, right? Not only have our expectations changed all season, and then going into this game, we're like, hey, house money, whatever happens, happens. We were happy to be here. But then it's like, damn, we're playing football. We're playing football against the best team in the NFC. And we're playing them tough and in their building, and we have a chance here. And then it starts to fall apart. And the fact that you have this lead, and we already talked about the Aaron Jones run, there's so much good going on. What happens in the last 10 minutes, 9.5 minutes of this game that it just crumbles before your eyes?
Well, Matt LaFleur put on his Mike McCarthy hat, apparently, because he forgot he had Aaron Jones to run the ball. I mean, that's part of it. So, when we get the ball back in the fourth quarter, it's a 3 and out on 3 short passes. It's 2 yards, 6 yards, incomplete punt. Aaron Jones still plays on this team. That was unfortunate. But as unfortunate as the 3 and out was, the defense is still stout after San Francisco gets the ball back.
They're mostly stout. I mean, San Francisco did move the ball a little. They moved 35 yards. They had a couple of big plays. I think the craziest thing about that drive is that they got down to the Packers 40-yard line, and on a 3rd and 10, we actually, for a change of pace, decided to actually stop them. Earlier in that drive, they converted on a 3rd and 10, but we decided to stop them on the 3rd and 10, and they punted from the Green Bay 40-yard line. And it was a 4th and 10, and they did end up pinning the Packers back to their 10-yard line. And in theory, that's a defensible play. But the first play of that next drive was this long run by Aaron Jones. And unfortunately, that was really the last high point as far as the offense is concerned. And we all know, of course, the missed field goal. But going to Jeff's point, as far as Aaron Jones had only had 2 carries in the fourth quarter. That 53-yard run and then one other 1-yard run. Those were his only 2 carries in the fourth quarter.
And this is where everybody on that run was ecstatic, cheering, going nuts. Okay, things have shifted. Certainly not only the field position, but just like momentum. So they're down at the San Francisco 24-yard line, 1st and 10. You're thinking, well, this is a slam dunk touchdown. Extend the lead. And
2-score lead. A touchdown makes it a 2-score game. If that's a 2-score game, we have a different outcome. We're playing in Detroit this weekend.
Absolutely. So this is where things, though, kind of got a little, I don't want to say conservative, but so I don't know if it was the San Francisco defense that steps up, or the play calling got conservative, no gain short pass, the Jones aforementioned 1-yard run. and another incomplete pass.
On that 3rd and 9 play, when we were at the San Francisco 23, we also had a clear indication of our offensive line challenges with Zach Tom being out. And on that 3rd and 9, ended up being a very rushed pass by Jordan Love, in which both Runyon and Nyman completely whiffed on their blocks, such that both of the defenders were coming from that right side of Jordan Love. He had to throw it away quickly. He had no time to make the play that he wanted to make on that 3rd and 9. And again, he gets a couple more yards. I think that Anders Carlson makes a field goal. Even if we don't get the field goal there, it was a stout play by the San Francisco defense, but it was also some mistakes by our offensive line. And specifically, that's one case where Zach Tom not being in there, Zach Tom being injured, hurt us.
And kudos to Love for not taking the sack, for starters. He saves some field position, but again, a 41-yard field goal is not asking a lot for a professional kicker.
Yeah, but it's not a chip shot either. You know, you got to remember, they moved the extra points are moved back to 33 yards because that's where it stops being a chip shot. And we've seen the percentages on extra points going down. But it's 41 yards from the left hash with the wind moving right to left on him as well. Justin Tucker, Greg Zuerlein, I don't think that they are going to be 100% from that one either. So I don't know. Do we want more consistency out of our kicker? Yes, but it's a situation where I'm not going to say it should have been automatic.
It shouldn't have been automatic, but this gets into the whole numbers on the season that Anders Carlson missed 13 total kicks on the year. In the 40 to 49 range, he was only 4 of 9 in field goals from 40 to 49 yards on the season. This was not a distance where he was good. This is not a distance where certainly automatic, absolutely, right? Going into that kick, he was 50%, but NFL kickers should be above 50% at 40 to 49 yards. And unfortunately, our kicker was not at that level. And combine that with the moment, combine that with a little bit of wind, a little bit of rain, and it was not even close as a field goal.
So it begs the question, though, should they have gone for it maybe? I mean, it was 4th and 9. I mean,
fourth and 9, you can't go for it. It's just, in the end, it was a failure, as you said, Jeff, on those 1st and 2nd downs, that it came to a 3rd and 9 that San Francisco could bluster the right side of our line in order to prevent us from moving the ball forward. But it shouldn't have been a 3rd and 9. I mean, in the end, if you get to a 3rd and 9 situation, you have not succeeded on the previous 2 plays as your offense. And that was really where all the problems came about.
Right. I really am not paying any attention to anyone who thinks that Anders Carlson lost the game for this team.
No.
The failure, like you said, Neil, happened 2 plays prior to that because the offense falters. The offense doesn't do what it needs to do after a big 53-yard run to continue to move the ball down the field. And even after this, there's still a lot of ball game left that the defense does continue to step up.
And
we're still ahead. We're still ahead.
And we're still ahead anyway. Exactly. We're still ahead. The defense keeps us in this game, and the offense gets another chance to try to do something before San Francisco gets their touchdown.
Their 69-yard drive.
Yeah. Nice.
I'm not going to call that one nice, but but perhaps even more important than it being a 69-yard drive is that they got the ball with 6:18 left, and the defense failed there, not just because they allowed the touchdown over 12 plays, but it's because they didn't do the things that were necessary to force San Francisco's hand. When you're in a situation where a touchdown is going to give the other team the lead, you can't let them go on a long, methodical drive. You've got to do one of 2 things. You either have to blitz them appropriately in order to force a mistake, force a turnover on downs, or alternatively, allow them to score quickly because of them making a play off of a blitz where it's a blown coverage or whatever. But you cannot allow a methodical drive when it's 6:19 left. And if they score, you're going to be behind and you need time in order to get the tying or go ahead score. You've got to play more aggressively. The bend but don't break defense is specifically a failure in the situation of San Francisco's last drive. You've got to try to either break them or they're going to break you. But bending is the worst possible outcome.
Well, especially since we saw Brock Purdy throw up some horseshit balls that should have been intercepted. There were two at least where he just got lucky. If you put pressure on Brock Purdy, he will throw up a bad pass or make bad passes. You can't passive defense. Then, suddenly Brock Purdy is going to be the best guy on the field and he's going to pick you apart. And that's exactly what he did. And mixing the run game with the pass game.
So they had their whole offensive playbook
Yes.
available, and we let them have their whole offensive playbook available. They had 3 running conversions and 2 passing conversions for first downs on that drive. A lot of McCaffrey, a lot of passing. They did whatever they wanted. The other thing that I noticed during that last drive is it looked like our front 4 was gassed. Our front 4 did very little as far as pressure on that last drive. And that argues either do a little bit of rotation at some point, or alternatively, you've got to really turn up the heat to force something to happen because your front 4 was not providing the pressure you needed in that situation.
100% agree on all that. Blitz, do something. But what was done was not obviously effective. So San Francisco, and almost that last play when McCaffrey scored, it almost looked like it was Holmgren-esque almost,
No,
right?
I don't agree with that. I think that's a load of shit. If you look at the individual players, each of the individual players was trying to stop them. I think that's a load of shit. But you can't. It was a 3rd and 1. It was a 3rd and 1. You should not be conceding a touchdown on a 3rd and 1. And I don't think the Packers defense was conceding a touchdown. The problem is the Packers defense is led by Joe Barry, who is singularly incapable of defending a 3rd and 1, especially if it's near the goal line.
So they score the touchdown. McCaffrey, after he breaks through the line, he walks in. So, okay. So they're up 24-21. So we get the ball back, 3 timeouts, a little over a minute on the clock. It's love time.
We've got the time to use all their playbook, and we only need 3 points in order to force overtime. And it started out okay. We got a first down over 3 plays with some short passes to Dobbs and Musgrave. And then, well, Jordan Love was a young quarterback. I think that's all you can say is that. And there was a feel of desperation. It was more desperation that he felt, I think, than was absolutely necessary because, again, we had 52 seconds left with 2 timeouts when the interception was thrown. But I will say I rewatched, I had a lot of beef Swellington. I not only went through the play-by-play, but I rewatched the entire game. And one of the things that was disconcerting for me in rewatching that last interception is that Jordan Love had nobody to throw to within 25 yards of the line of scrimmage. Specifically, Jaden Reed, Bo Melton, and Christian Watson were all 25 to 35 yards downfield. There was no outlet that he could throw to. And I think there's a play calling problem there if that is the situation that you're putting your quarterback in when there is plenty of time, there's plenty of timeouts, and you only need a field goal. You needed a better play at that point as well. Obviously, it's mostly on Jordan Love, but Matt LaFleur could have done a better job of putting his quarterback in a position on that play.
So have some kind of safety valve or somebody out of the backfield or something that he can check down to versus having to either chuck it down the field or have an incomplete pass. I mean, at this point, an incomplete pass is not terrible.
It was not a problem at all. It wasn't a problem at all. But why are all of your receivers 25 plus yards downfield? This is not essentially the play was designed as a chuck it downfield play. 3 receivers, 25 to 35 yards downfield. Yeah. The play was designed to chuck it downfield. What did Jordan Love do? He chucked it downfield as the play was designed.
Right. If they've got 0 timeouts or 1 timeout and there's like 15, 20 seconds left, okay, fine. But this was not that. We've seen this, though, a couple times, at the end of games this year, right? Where it's just like, that just wasn't.
The Pittsburgh game was the perfect example
exactly.
of that, where we had no game plan whatsoever for the end of the game. It's like, well, we're going to hope for the best without giving our players the best chance.
Right. And as good as Jordan Love is, he still is not yet that good to be able to dictate at the end of the game.
There was nobody open. There was nobody open downfield. There was nobody open downfield. San Francisco was playing deep, and our offensive line was tired. They forced him out of the pocket, and you got nobody to throw to in the intermediate. This is a split-second decision by a quarterback in his first year as a starting quarterback.
Yep.
this is a situation that is begging for a mistake to be made.
This is where we spend the offseason watching that play, or Jordan Love does, and he learns how to throw the ball away in this situation. Yep. Was it designed to chuck downfield? Yes. Does that mean you have to chuck it downfield? No. So know where to go, know what your out is, know how to keep that drive alive. And I think he did throughout the season, grew in that ability to keep a drive alive, how to keep a play alive. And
he was great for most of the second half of the season. He was great at that for a lot of the second half of the season, including earlier in the game, including against Dallas.
Yeah, if we're looking at this as the growing pains, that was one of them, Jeff, and it will get better.
No, agreed. Just shitty timing, unfortunately. But lesson learned. And to Neil's earlier point, if this is something where he really takes this to heart and say, all right, that's not going to happen again. So again, next year, if we see him roll out and do a Patrick Mahomes and, if there's nobody within 10 or 15 yards of him, he picks up 10 or 15 yards with his legs, or he does some incredible sideline throw, or just, like you said, the best play of all, throw the damn thing away. So that's, again, going back to this, it's a window, but by the same token, a learning experience for Love. I hope we don't see these throws again next year, and I hope we're in the same position again.
And once again, final score, 24-21, the Green Bay Packers season comes to a close in San Francisco in the divisional round. There's 4 teams left. We'll talk about those 4 teams in a little bit, but maybe some final statistics on this game. Any takeaways, Neil?
We were a Jekyll and Hyde team overall over the course of the game. I gave you the quarters 1 through 3 statistics. Jordan Love in the fourth quarter was only 5 of 9 for 19 yards, a 2.1 yard per attempt in that fourth quarter. And part of that was play calling. Part of that was at the end, it was desperation, but there was certainly an issue with our play calling. But overall, our first and third quarters looked really good. Our second and fourth quarters didn't. And the numbers that I actually want to compare are Jordan Love in quarters 1 and 3 versus 2 and 4. Jordan Love in quarters 1 and 3 was 13 of 20 for 128 yards, 2 touchdowns with an interception. Quarters 2 and 4, only 8 of 14 for 66 yards, 66 yards over 2 quarters of football with no touchdowns, 1 interception. There was one other number that stood out to me, and that was looking at tackles. In the first half, when our defense was playing at its best, we were led by Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker with 6 and 5 tackles, 11 tackles by those linebackers. In the first half, we only had 8 tackles by our defensive backs. In the second half, when we were playing a little bit more on our back foot for much of the latter half, the defensive backs had 15 tackles in the second half compared to only 6 for those central linebackers. And when your tackles are moving from the linebacker position to the D-back position, you know that things aren't going as well as they could be. And we saw that. We saw in the game that the defense did well up until a certain point, and then it was just a situation where they were pushing us and we were not able to sufficiently resist. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I think absence of any sacks after the first quarter is a major part of that. The absence of any real numbers for Rashawn Gary is something that is a discussion point down the road. But in the end, whether it's offense, whether it's defense, whether it's special teams, all 3 units made mistakes that if it goes a different way, we might win that game. And I think not having a single GOAT for the game is something that is important for the teamwork, for the team continuing to develop that, okay, we all are capable of getting better. All of us need to play better. And if we work in the offseason, we work on our planning, we are going to be a better team next year.
Well, it also underscores the importance of that week of rest, perhaps, as well. So Green Bay defense, they played all those snaps against Dallas, and maybe fatigue started to set in towards the end of the game. And San Francisco with the bye week, number 1 seed, they're rested. Just from a physical standpoint, maybe that's a little bit of an edge as well. I do want to highlight, though, the fact that how good the Packer offense was and how good Aaron Jones was. And the fact that Aaron Jones, with his 100-plus yards rushing in the game, he broke the San Francisco streak of not allowing a 100-yard rusher for 51 games. I mean, that's what, 3+ years. Kudos to him. And he was really in this playoff run with fresh legs, really a difference maker. But man, what a string of games he put together at the end here. Super excited for him. And it was great to see that happen as well.
Right, Jeff, add to that, that's 5 consecutive 100-yard rushing games for Aaron Jones. First time in franchise history that has happened for a Packer running back.
Nice.
Really? First time ever.
I didn't know that.
Yes, I have the book.
The
and
Bible.
This will tell you. Yeah, you know, I like saying, hey, Aaron Jones is going to get his name in the media guide for that one, and he will. Most consecutive games, 100 or more yards rushing. Now, the last time Aaron Jones had 2 consecutive games was in 2019. There are 19 players who have done it 2 games in a row. 3 games in a row, John Brockington, Dorsey Levens, Amon Green, and Amon Green. 4 games in a row, Amon Green and Amon Green. And now for the first time ever, 5 consecutive 100-yard rushing games, Aaron Jones in the 23-24 season.
Unbelievable.
And super meaningful playoff games.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, not just like, wow. Interesting. Well, we got to see history then. Awesome.
And yes, Jeff. And again, with
Jesus,
that,
Neil.
with that, the Green Bay Packers not one of the 4 remaining teams, but we'll talk about Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, Detroit. Maybe we'll talk about Jason Kelce doing his best Bert Kreischer impersonation in Buffalo. He certainly entertained the crowd. He had fun tailgating just like we did. We saw him do the bowling ball shot.
Just like we did.
But Neil, Taylor Swift, more importantly, gets to watch another football game, I think, right?
I apologize once again to Taylor Allison Swift. I am fully on board with Kansas City, not because of Taylor, but because in the end, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are just better than anyone else remaining. They've got the best super fan. They've got the best super fan number 2 in Jason Kelce. And despite the fact that Baltimore, if you look at the remaining teams, Baltimore is historically good as far as the numbers are concerned. Based on weighted DVA through the divisional round, they are number 1 all time. They're ahead of the 85 Bears, 96 Packers, 91 Washington, and 89 San Francisco, and 97 Packers, which are your next in that grouping. Despite that fact, I just think that in the end, Andy Reid being a better coach and the experience of that Kansas City team, the ability of Patrick Mahomes is going to be the difference. And Kansas City also has a spectacular second half defense. So Baltimore, Kansas City, and San Francisco are all top 3 as far as defenses and fewest points allowed. Kansas City has only allowed 29 points in the second half over their last 7 games. This is a team that knows how to be at their very best in the second half. They've got the ability. They are figuring out how to use their weak wide receiving core. They obviously have Travis Kelce with that and their super fandom. In the end, I just think that Kansas City is going to be able to figure out a way to do it because that's what Kansas City does.
I'm trying to find my voice here because I can't help but staring at Neil. For those of you who are just listening to this,
just say Buffalo shit the bed and move on.
Buffalo shit the bed, but Neil's wig is still distracting the shit out of me here. This is not right, but
it makes for great radio, Neil. Yes,
it does. So yes, Buffalo shit the bed. I will respectfully disagree with Neil, his super fandom and such. I think this is the Ravens' year. I think Lamar Jackson is going to step up and he may even outplay the other quarterback in this game. So we'll see. But I think this is the Ravens' year. And I think their defense, although injuries and things like that, I think they're going to just clamp down on Mahomes, and I don't think they're going to have an answer. I think this is the game where not having a real wide receiver number 1 or other options is going to come back to haunt him. So I see the Ravens here moving on as the number 1 seed.
Neil, you call them super fans. I call them front runners. And I agree with Jeff. I think that this is Baltimore's year. They have proven throughout the season they are the best team. Have they faltered a few times? Yes. But going back a month now to that Baltimore game at San Francisco and the way they dominated the 49ers. I think Baltimore does the same thing at home this weekend, and they march into Las Vegas for the Super Bowl.
John and Jeff, those are all completely logical decisions. I'm just telling you, football is an emotional game, and look at the emotions. The emotions are going to win this one.
All right, tell us about the NFC, Neil. What do you like?
The Packers have obviously played against both of the teams in the NFC Championship game. The Packers beat the Lions in one of the two matchups, and having just lost to San Francisco, there are two things. One, the Packers got lucky that we did not have to play against Deebo Samuel the whole game. I think this may have been a very different game if we had 4 quarters of Deebo Samuel. The other thing, though, is I was blown away by Drake Greenlaw and Fred Warner. Their linebackers are just at a completely different level. They're bringing me back to thoughts of the 85 Bears, and the abilities that they have to control the middle of the field is something that I don't think I've seen at this level in a very, very long time. And combine that with Charvarius Ward and people like that, their defense is capable of stopping Detroit's offense, and their offense is able to run through Detroit's defense, which is very suspect at many times. Detroit's got a great story. I just think San Francisco is a better team.
I agree with you, Neil. I think Cinderella's story is probably going to end the Detroit run. Goofy stuff is going to happen. If there's a weird injury, if Detroit is able to put pressure on Brock Purdy, and if he throws a couple balls that are not dropped in this game, that could swing it. I think it's probably going to be a close game, but Detroit on the road, just the emotions and everything else, I think Cinderella is going to come to an end here. So I do see San Francisco moving on as well. Just the depth they have, the experience. This is going to be a huge one of experience in this division championship, right? Because a whole bunch of these players have been there for multiple years now. So I think Detroit, just sort of happy to be there. But I think they're going to get some pressure on Goff. And as we've seen, when Goff gets pressured, he's not very good.
I mean, I don't think Detroit is just happy to be there, but I want to go back to a point I made last week, which you just brought up again, that it's not just that San Francisco is experienced, it's that they felt that they got robbed because of injuries last year. They are playing with a chip on their shoulder all year because they felt that they should have gone to the Super Bowl last year. They've got a focus that I don't think Detroit can match with Dan Campbell and the rest of the team's emotion. That focus is the X factor, I think, that makes a difference at the edges. And I think that's going to be sufficient combined with the talent gap to win the game for San Francisco.
Agreed. And being at home and really, because I think Green Bay scared the crap out of them too, right? San Francisco. So I think that's probably not going to happen again. All those factors. Yes.
Neil, you're right about what you said earlier about football being an emotional game and an emotional experience. And there has been a lot of emotion in Detroit over the last couple of weeks. And is San Francisco the better team? Probably. Does anybody lose a game like the Detroit Lions do? No, they don't. But from a fan perspective, as I said before, these Detroit fans are going through what we went through in the mid-90s. For that purpose, I will root for Detroit. I want to see these fans feel that. I know it goes against divisional rivalry, but I will be happy for Detroit fans if they win this game and get to their first Super Bowl. And with that, we will talk about who the two teams are remaining when we come back next week. As for now, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe, leave us a comment, find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That is all one word. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And we are on Facebook at the GBC podcast, Green Bay Chat. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Night.